Hi there, I'm Charlie Andrew. I'm a producer and this is my studio. This is where I spend most of my time recording and mixing the bands I work with. So over the years, I've worked with a band called Audient, just finished their third album. Also artists such as Marika Hackman and Sivu, all of which I've just done new albums with. And obviously there's various others along the way. I've worked with Madness, Benjamin Francis Leftwich, various others. At school, I had a keen interest in science, physics mainly, and mathematics, and I also learnt two instruments. I learnt the drums and the saxophone, actually. And then it was sort of dawned on me that it'd be very, very fun to merge the two together somehow. I knew I was never going to be a sort of professional soloist, but somehow combining the two really sort of intrigued me, you know. I was very fortunate that when I did my A-levels, the school I was at had a small studio, very basic setup. I just found myself in there all the time, you know, break time, after school, whatever, just messing about. So I realised this is what I want to do. As I said, I spend most of my time in this room. It's quite cosy, but it does the job. I certainly understand the acoustic in here, so I do my mixing in here. It's part of a bigger complex, so there's a communal live space with another control room, which I sometimes use as another live space. Very versatile space, and you know, I love it here. Equipment-wise, I'm running on Pro Tools HDX and a various array of inputs. I've got the Audient 880 here and the 008 over here, and various other inputs going in, depending on what I'm recording. So the 880 I use quite often when I'm tracking drums. Because it's so transparent, it works on most things, or pretty much everything, to be honest. So if I've got quite a lot of mics on a drum kit, it's perfect for that. Also for acoustic guitars, it's just a lovely piece of kit, really. I really like recording acoustic guitars from quite a distance and then really compressing it. And you can hear the environment that the player is in. I do close mic, and that can be spot on for whatever some things, but sometimes it's quite cool if you've got kind of like a fast rock and roll song and it's an acoustic guitar, just to heavily compress a distant mic, and that's your acoustic guitar. I think it's really cool. Also, it gives a bit of perspective to your mix, a bit of depth, just naturally, rather than having to put reverb on a close mic guitar. I'm a big fan of recording ambience as well, so there'll be various mics dotted around, sort of off mic as it were, you know, getting the room ambience and all the bits that quite often people don't necessarily want to hear. I want to hear them, so each room will have at least one ambient mic, just to as far off source as possible, just to get that intrigue going. So for mixing, on an outboard point of view, I use these two EQs a lot. So the GML is a beautiful piece of kit. So I use that a lot, and it's got the Marg here, which it's got a lovely air band on it, which is for just that real top lift at the end there. Also this lovely piece of kit here, Vortexian. It's an old mixer from the 50s, which is just great for getting a little bit of character on various things with, you know, percussion and things like that. Something with lots of transients, you can just drive it quite hard. So as you can see, it's quite a small room. So plugins do sort of have a big part of what I do. There's some really great ones out there these days, but as long as I can get the sound I want at source, hopefully the mixing process should look after itself. That's the idea. But yeah, when it comes to things like compression, I do a little bit on the way in on vocals and things like that. Anything that's kind of like a lead line might have a little bit of, depending on the sonic I'm after. But yeah, sort of sometimes it's quite fun to experiment down the line. I've got so many different sets of speakers here because I like to reference the mix on different outputs. So you've got the big vocals, which have obviously got more bottom end than the Oratones, for example. The Oratones are I find really useful for things like balancing vocals and things like that, because sometimes when you've got a lot of bass in your mix or something, it might mask some of the vocal and you end up pushing the vocal up a lot, and then you take it elsewhere and you realise you've mixed the vocal too loud. So it's quite nice. I find the Oratones very useful for that. Obviously NS10s is, you know, sort of industry standard reference point. And then also I've got the radio here, which is, ultimately what a lot of people are going to be listening to mixes on, so make sure it stands up on that too. I actually quite like it when a performance is imperfect. I think those are the things that catch my ear in a positive way, rather than, I think it would certainly catch my ear in a very negative way if the whole drum performance was flawless. Do you know what I mean? And just like no dynamic to it whatsoever. That doesn't interest me. You might as well just turn that on, turn the 808 on or something. That's what that does. I want to hear a human performance. For me personally, I would want to hear more of that in today's music. Like I said before, I'm very fortunate with some of the artists that I work with that they are quite open-minded to that, and I think they've got a similar viewpoint to me, all listening to sort of older recordings that intrigue you because, there's imperfections in there that really are quite endearing. And I think, I've just done the Marika Hackman record and that was all track live. Same with Sivu, it was me and him. Basically, the whole album was based on a live take that he performed, and then we might embellish the arrangement after that, but on top of this live take that may not have been recorded to a click. Some were, some weren't. Which is, I think, just adds a real magic to the whole thing, really.